I had my first encounter with Carl Jung when I was 12 years old, going on 13. I was then in 8th grade, and a friend of mine and I had agreed to write an extra credit paper for our science class, I think on life on other planets. And I have to tell you, I don't remember whether we ever wrote that paper. I don't think we did. But we did research it, and I remember we pedaled out to the Levittown, Pennsylvania Public Library on our bicycles, and we looked in the card catalog, and many, I think, of you, but not all of you, are old enough to remember card catalogs. And we had the idea we were going to write a chapter on flying saucers, the way different people tried to explain them. And we looked for flying saucers, and there were 3 books on flying saucers. There was Gray Barker's They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. There was Frank Scully's Behind the Flying Saucers. And the third was Carl Jung, Flying Saucers, a Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Skies. And we borrowed the books and we took them home and we read them, or we tried to read them. At age 12, how much do you get out of Carl Jung? I think I would have gotten a good deal more out of his book, which is the last book that he published before his death. It came out in German in 1958 and then an English translation in 1959. I think I would have gotten a good deal more out of it if I had had somebody there to explain to me that for Jung, calling something a myth was not disparagement. Quite the contrary, that a myth was something from our shared unconscious that could be the most profound truth of all. I did pick up a few nuggets here and there. I picked up the word mandala, and after many rereadings of the book at different ages, I came to understand the mandala as the circular archetype that conveys the integration of opposites. I don't know that I was struck by Jung's use of the quaternity, although it was very important for his book. Going back to the mandala for a moment, in retrospect, I can see that that was a key to his understanding of the UFO, since aerodynamically, I don't know if circular flying machines make any huge amounts of sense, but if you assume them psychic projections into the sky, then they're precisely the shape that they need to be. I knew Jung talked in that book a good deal about the vision of Ezekiel in Ezekiel chapter 1, which even at age 12 going on 13 quite fascinated me. I don't think I understood the significance when he spoke of the vision as being 2 sets of quaternities. And later on, I came to understand the quaternity as another archetype of completeness, the foursome of which one is somehow different from the other 3. And perhaps the parade example of the quaternity would be the 4 Gospels, where you have the 3 synoptics and then the 4th, which is, yes, part of the same category, and yet somehow different from it. All of these concepts are ones that I want to use today to illuminate to specific UFO experiences. While we're together, I want to examine with you two cases in which I think the Jungian approach gives us the key to understanding the UFO experience and what is being experienced. We often speak of them as UFO sightings, but I must say I would prefer to think of them as visions. One of these cases is from 1959 and involves a thoroughly obscure figure, a young Anglican priest, or at the time, in 1959 he was young, named William Booth Gill. And the other is from 15 years later in 1974 and involves one of the most famous people in the world, whom you have all certainly heard of, and this is John Lennon, the ex-Beatle, whose life was tragically ended in December of 1980. So I would like to look at what these people experienced. I would say two people, but in fact, there were many more involved in these two episodes. In the case of Father Gill, I think we can know rather well what he and his fellow witnesses were looking at, namely the planets Jupiter and Saturn, and the bright stars Spica and Rigel Centaurus, which seem to approach them and then vanish in the distance as the clouds dispersed or thickened. But if that was what they were looking at, it was not what they saw. And where the interest of the UFO lies for me is the gulf between what is looked at and what is seen. Something intervenes between the object of vision and the vision. And that intervening is the UFO, the visitor, not from outer, but from inner space.